Oil drilling is threatening one of the last truly wild places in the world. I spent much time over the past 2 years researching the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the debate of whether or not we should drill for oil there. Using renewable energy sources instead of drilling for oil not only preserves this refuge, it also provides a renewable energy source. The ANWR is 20 million acres of land located in the northeast corner of Alaska. It contains significant amounts of oil there, which is why this debate is ongoing. The oil is said to be necessary. However, if we didn't drill for oil on this refuge, they would just change it to another location with similar outcomes, which is why I propose that hydropower systems should be used in Alaska to create a renewable energy source instead of drilling for oil on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The coastal plain is located within the ANWR and it's 20 to 40 miles wide, and it's mostly surrounded by mountains and the sea. So this provides temporary and year-round habitats that are safe from predators because of those regions. We see this with the musk oxen, and that species was actually thought to have been endangered, and for a while it was thought to have been extinct. But now they are flourishing on this refuge, and there's currently a herd of about 250 of them residing there. So a lot of herds actually migrate to the coastal plain, again, because it's heavily fortified, and there's even some birthing grounds there. So the caribou, there's a herd of 130,000 caribou that travel over 1,500 miles, starting in Canada, to get to this coastal plain. And Paulson's article, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge 101, actually stresses that the ANWR has the environmental importance of the Grand Canyon. So there is thought to be 5.7 to up to 16 billion barrels of oil on the coastal plain. This picture over here, this black line shows where the refuge starts and ends. This is a zoomed in picture. And then this red line is actually the coastal plain. These thick black marks actually show the polar bear dens in the heavier areas. And then there's some other den habitats over here in the gray. The coastal plain is also referred to as the 1002 area. And the proposed drilling would take place in this left section over here. The footprint of drilling would extend over 10,000 acres. And the article called Potential Impacts of Proposed Oil and Gas Development on the Arctic Refuge's Coastal Plain actually extends that even further, saying that pipelines, roads, utility lines, and everything else needed to drill for oil will actually act as a blockade to this area, so animals no longer have access to it, and extends that footprint even further than expected. Because these animals will be forced out of this coastal plain, we're going to see an increased rate of predation, especially because of those birthing grounds and dens and habitats that are there, just because of that fortified area. The soil and water would be contaminated from the emissions, the fuels, and all of that kind of stuff that goes into oil drilling. The polar bear dens would also be evacuated by the polar bears and could even cause some issues between the polar bears and people getting hurt because its mothers trying to protect their young. And also the caribou birthing grounds and their migratory patterns could even be permanently affected by this. So this is kind of a breakdown of renewable energy sources. Changing the drill site won't solve anything because it's just going to move the problem to another location and to other wildlife and forestry there. And there's 5 different types of renewable energy sources that we can use. There's sunlight, wind, biomass, Earth's internal heat and water. This chart to the right here breaks down all of those in price per kilowatt per hour. I'm suggesting we use hydro systems, which cost 6 cents, versus coal and natural gas, which would cost up to 12. So it could end up being at least double the price, and it's worse for our environment. So these are two different types of pumped storage hydropower systems. The main difference between the two is this one has a naturally flowing water feature, where this one stands alone. But they act the same. So the US Department of Energy's article titled Types of Hydropower Systems explains that part of a river is channeled into a pumped storage tank. This water is then stored at these lower reservoirs here and will eventually be pumped into the upper reservoir. This creates potential energy while the water is in the higher reservoir. When electric's needed, this water is then released through these tunnels and pumps through these turbines, and that's what actually generates the electricity. And because Alaska has such mountainous and rocky regions, I think this would work very well. And we could also even use one large dam because there's so many different levels and potential energy in Alaska's regions. Both of these options are more environmentally friendly than oil drilling is because they use water to generate electric and they don't emit harmful chemicals or emissions. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge plays an important part in the survival of many species. Therefore, drilling for oil there should be prohibited. However, changing the location of the drill site for the oil will not solve the environmental issues associated with oil drilling. This would just affect another area in the wildlife or forestry there. Most of Alaska is open to development, so I believe we should install hydropower systems to create renewable energy. These systems would use natural running water to generate electric. They would cause no emissions, no waste, and leave a smaller footprint than oil drilling would. Oil drilling will cause negative impacts on the environment, especially on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And this is why we should use renewable energy sources instead of fossil fuels found in the refuge. It is our responsibility to take care of the environment.